Good morning, everyone, and welcome to my reflections for Sunday, the 5th of September. Now, today in the Gospel reading from St. Mark chapter 7, Jesus is on the move. He has crossed into the border to the region of Tyre, into Gentile country. And in the passages before our reading, Jesus has declared the purity laws of the Pharisees to be null and void. He's just told them that nothing they eat can defile them, and that it's what comes out of a person that defiles them. He goes on to explain this by saying that it's from within us that our cruel attitudes and meanness, our prejudice and our anger all come. So you may ask yourself, why immediately after this does Jesus himself say some hurtful words to a woman that comes to him for help? This woman, this Gentile woman, approaches him, begging him to heal her daughter. And what does Jesus say to her? He says, it's not right for the master to give the food due to the children to the dogs. Why would he be so dismissive of this woman at this time when she is obviously in a moment of great distress? Why would he be apparently so rude and dismissive of her? Why would he respond to her plea by telling her that literally she was nothing better than a dog? Now, our text makes it clear that at this moment in time, Jesus wants to be left alone. And I wonder at this time as well whether he was feeling a bit drained physically, spiritually. And this time he needs on his own is what we all need at times, just something to refocus and to refresh us. Maybe he needed to be replenished with the Spirit himself before continuing with his mission. After all, just before this, he's already postponed a planned retreat, if you like, with his disciples to show compassion to the crowds. The multitudes followed him when he was trying to find some solitary time away from them all, just with the disciples. And yet he then, even in his tiredness, is compelled to keep on feeding the multitudes, healing the sick, freeing people who were possessed by demons. So maybe, after all of this, Jesus himself was just exhausted and desperate for a break. And like we all are when we get desperate for a break and overworked, often we do and say things which may not come out the way that we intended them to be. The crowds continued to follow Jesus around, and this Gentile woman had followed him and found him. And she is obviously exhausted herself. Her daughter is demon-possessed, and we've learned from other gospel passages that those who are possessed often lash out, hurt themselves, hurt other people. This mother is obviously exhausted and desperate for her child to be made well. Now, when you read commentaries on this passage, scholars always try to explain this apparent rebuff by Jesus as if he was just testing her faith, or as if he wanted it to draw out a response of faith from her. Or maybe it was to teach the crowd a lesson about the way they, as most of them would have been Jews, would have thought of the Gentiles themselves. But maybe, just maybe, it was because he was exhausted and he was at his weakest moment as well. It's also interesting that when Jesus responds with those words, "Let the children be fed first," the woman does not question that response of Jesus. She accepts in many ways his analogy and its implications that she was less as a Gentile than the Jews were. And yet she even then points out that even when all the children have had what they want, even the dogs get some benefit. So maybe the woman herself knew and she could see that Jesus was exhausted himself, but she knew that even the slightest bit of his regard for her may bring hope to her daughter. Now you may wonder, as I often did do when I first read this passage, why Mark has this story in his gospel when it can be seen to show Jesus as being someone without compassion, someone who's dismissive of someone in need. And I wonder, as I thought about this, whether it may be because Mark sees this woman as a transformer, just like Jesus himself was. In some ways, she herself does what she has just obviously witnessed Jesus doing with the Pharisees. When the Pharisees tried to trip Jesus up, he threw their words back at them to make them look to be the foolish ones. And that's what she does here in the same way. She doesn't say, "Don't call me a dog." She says, yeah, but even the dogs get the crumbs. Even the dogs get something from the master's table. And it's interesting that Jesus accepts those words of wisdom from this Gentile woman. And I believe that she has challenged him. She's enabled him to refocus on the way he maybe should be continuing his ministry of blessing and of healing and of proclaiming God's kingdom to all. In a strange way, Jesus allows this Gentile woman to remind him what his own good news is about. This woman has heard about Jesus and heard about his power. Maybe she's witnessed some of the things he's done as she's followed him around. And she's also seen and heard about his compassion and about his ability to make the impossible possible. And she, as a woman of faith, refuses to believe that a loving and gracious God would not want her daughter to be healed. And she was right. And she reminds Jesus of that truth. And so this Jesus, who himself was known for never losing an argument, in many ways yields to her request. Whatever his motives were, even if the commentators are right that he did this intentionally, there would have been people there who would have seen Jesus as being humbled in the eyes of the people who were witnessing this event, because he was apparently rebuffed by this Gentile woman, and he ascends to her request. Now, some of us, like the Jewish people in Jesus' time, can draw lines between ourselves and others, those who we consider as other, those who we consider as being different. And we can make all sorts of excuses of why we don't respond to them in need. And this is particularly true when we are tired ourselves. Modern life puts great strain on us. It wears us out. It makes us so reluctant, if you like, to give even more when we have already given so much. And so it's easy to find reasons why not to help others in need. And if we're honest, we all make unconscious judgments every day about who deserves our help or our kindness, our attention, our love, and those who we choose to ignore, to respond to. It's very easy for us to grow complacent about how we treat the other or the stranger or those who are different from us. And as God's children, if we truly are God's children, we must always be on our guard against that attitude. There's no doubt that Mark in his Gospel sees this confrontation with this woman as a pivotal moment in Jesus' ministry. It's interesting also that immediately after Jesus leaves this woman, he doesn't go home to his own people, to God's children, if you like, the Israelites. Immediately, it says, he goes to the Decapolis, a network of 10 Greek or Gentile cities. There, he heals a deaf man with a speech impediment. He feeds 4,000 people, most of whom would undoubtedly have been Gentiles. So maybe, just maybe, this mother's persistence benefited more than just her own daughter. Maybe her actions even helped Jesus in the moment of his weakness to refocus that his ministry was to all people. Whatever we were before, whatever people say of us or used to say of us, or even the things that we may have believed about ourselves as well in the past, each and every single one of us is a child of God. We are his children. All of us are his children. And if we identify with this Gentile woman begging for crumbs of mercy from God's table, then we are reminded that Jesus does not want to leave any of us hungry, sick, or tired. Jesus died for the whole world, for each and every single one of us, for every child, for every person, from every tribe and language and nation. Even crumbs from God's table proved to be enough for this woman's daughter to be healed. And even crumbs from God's table are enough for us to be healed of the things which take us away from God or the hurts of the past. Even the crumbs of God's table are able to bring restoration to the downtrodden. That is the heart of the good news. And so as we journey this week through our lives, may we be aware of this Gentile woman and look for those like her in our own community. And may we approach Jesus on their behalf and actively seek ways to bring about the well-being of those in desperate need. May we be people who bring the crumbs from God's table to those around us. May we strive to be Christ's hands and feet in this world, providing crumbs for the healing of all people. Amen. Okay, so that's it for today. I'll see you next week with my reflections for next week. And until then, keep praying, keep believing, and keep safe. God bless.